Hi, my name is Ashley Childs, and this is my signature assignment for Religion 367. In this presentation, I'm going to be answering the question of whether or not yoga is cultural appropriation. So before I attempt to answer that question, I'm going to be providing some historical background of yoga, so where yoga originally comes from. Yoga is first described in India's earliest scriptures, the Vedas. In the 15th century BCE, yoga is described as meaning yoke. So, for example, the yoke or rig of a chariot, something that connects one thing to something else. Between 200 BCE and 400 CE, the Mahabharata is written, and in it, yoga is described as being a divine chariot that physically carries dead warriors to a heaven reserved for gods and heroes. So, again, it's something that connects one thing to something else. In this case, literally the dead warriors to heaven. In the Bhagavad Gita, a conversation happens between the character Arjuna and Krishna, in which Krishna describes yoga to Arjuna and kind of explains the importance of it as well. So yoga is thought to have first originated in northern India thousands of years ago. We don't know exactly when, but definitely thousands of years ago. Shiva, the god Shiva, is considered to be the first yogi who passed on his yogic teachings to humans. Yoga is described in the Upanishads, which are over 2,000 Hindu philosophical and religious scriptures. The concept of a yoga body, the early concept of that, was not a focus on physical appearance of the body, but on philosophical centers of the body. So, for example, Kakras, Granthas, and Adaras. There was a focus on the movement of vital life forces through the body, and the concept of the yoga body was a means of achieving supernatural powers and nirvana, so the end of the cycle of death and rebirth. The physical body was also seen as a microcosm of the universe, so very different from the modern perspective of what you might think of a yoga body being. So some important aspects of early yoga are found in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and they are the 8 limbs of yoga. You can see them here. We have yama, which is restraint and discipline, niyama, positive duties or observances, asanas, which are postures, pranayamas, which are breathing techniques, pratyaharas, which are sense withdrawals, dharana, focused concentration, dhyana, meditative absorption, and samadhi, bliss or enlightenment. So as I mentioned before, yoga was kind of a means to attain supernatural powers, though that wasn't the entire goal. It was just an important aspect of early yoga. And it was important to use yoga as a means of achieving liberation or samadhi. That was kind of the ultimate goal of achieving bliss or enlightenment and ending the cycle of death and rebirth. So with that information, how has yoga changed over time to what it is now and how we know it today? So I'm going to be discussing some Western perceptions of yoga practitioners, early European perceptions specifically. Europeans viewed Hindu yogis and Muslim fakirs as the same thing, even though they were not. They were totally different religious, cultural backgrounds. Europeans viewed yoga practitioners generally negatively. They were seen as being other, exhibiting satanic and profane behaviors. Europeans saw yogis as being disruptive to colonialism and British economic pursuits. They considered them social parasites, considered the asanas and the positions and poses they were doing as being more like contortionists, entertainment performers, like circus performers. They weren't taken seriously for their like religious endeavors and practices. So this starts to change a bit with the physical culture movement in the 19th century. There's an increased interest in physical fitness. This kind of ties to European and American nationalism, where stronger bodies were believed to like correlate with a stronger nation. Yogendra meshed yoga with European physical culture. So yoga as a means of curative gymnastics and fitness training. His teachings and practices kind of lost their original cultural and spiritual ties to yoga and westernized the concept a bit. So during this period, there's also practices of harmonial gymnastics and esoteric dance, where predominantly European women, and men as well, but mostly women, participated in stretching, fluid movement that is inspired by yoga. So basically the Western cultures are kind of beginning to accept and have an interest in the kind of movements and physicality that's involved in yoga. So how did yoga become more westernized? Swami Vivekananda is considered the creator of modern yoga, and he played a huge role in the westernization of yoga, people in the West kind of accepting and having more of an interest in yoga. He introduced Hinduism to America in the 1893 World's Parliament of Religions. He made yoga more approachable and acceptable to Westerners, and he did that by combining spirituality with science, which was something that was a prominent interest for Western culture in the late 1800s. There's also, during this time, and on to the modern era, a rise in popularity of Indian yoga gurus who really influenced the spread of yoga in the modern Western world. Some of these include Krishnamacharya, who really popularized the concept of asanas, Patabi Joyce, who had a big influence on vinyasas, like breathing techniques, and BKS Iyengar, who made yoga more inclusive and accessible to a wider variety of people. So now I'm going to be talking about yoga today and explaining how it is maybe different from the traditional practice of yoga. So in modern yoga classes, there is a big focus on asanas and vinyasas. The classes are condensed into an hour or so, multiple times a week. They are more separated from the lives of the people who participate, so this is very different than traditional yogis who would make the practice their entire lives and have a very strong devotion to it. It's something that participants do as a form of exercise and relaxation. And again, it's an outside part of their regular lives. It doesn't tie in their entire lives to yoga. The classes follow a teacher, not a dedicated guru. They don't follow the guru-disciple relationship of traditional yoga. And the modern classes are more casual than yoga. As I mentioned, it doesn't focus as much on spirituality, modern discipline, intense commitment to the practice that was found in traditional yoga. So modern yoga has a very strong relationship to capitalism. Western culture over time has turned yoga into a business. Yoga is viewed as a tool for enhancing physical health, and that's one that can be bought through purchasing classes, memberships to yoga studios. In-person yoga classes are often offered and paid for by participants, and they are often expensive. So it kind of limits who can participate. Clothing brands offer clothes specifically made to be worn while practicing yoga. And there's a strong social media influence. Influencers promote a yoga lifestyle that can be obtained through buying yoga clothing and participating in yoga classes. There is a strong focus on fitness instead of spirituality in modern yoga. So the Western physical culture movement kind of embraces yoga as a method of increasing physical fitness. Western yoga is predominantly a physical practice. The spiritual aspects of yoga are generally overshadowed by the physical benefits. As I mentioned, the social media influence is a big difference with yoga. Yoga is viewed again as a form of acrobatics, competition between who can achieve the most impressive poses on social media. And people are drawn to yoga in pursuit of a perfect body rather than for the spiritual benefits of traditional yoga. So yoga has been very much so whitewashed over time. 1 in 15 Americans practice yoga, and 4/5 of that group is made up of white people. Modern yoga changes the traditional names of asanas to more Western names. For example, the Bhujangasana is the cobra pose, Adho Mukha Savasana is downward facing dog, and Vipassana 2 becomes warrior 2. White practitioners of yoga adapt aspects of Hindu and Buddhist culture without fully understanding the meaning. So, for example, you might find statues of Hindu or Buddhist deities in yoga studios that aren't being respected in the traditional way that they should be. People include them and they don't really know what they mean. They wear clothing with Sanskrit words that they don't really understand, and decorate the studio in a way that doesn't fit their cultural background. So in conclusion, is yoga cultural appropriation? I believe that yes, modern westernized form of yoga that is most commonly practiced today is cultural appropriation. Why? Modern yoga is a product of westernization of traditional yoga. So Western culture has cherry-picked aspects of yoga that it likes and has basically discarded the rest. It doesn't really show respect for the historical and cultural origins of yoga. It's transformed yoga into a product that can be commodified, and it's removed the spiritual religious history of yoga. So all of these factors together really, to me, point to the conclusion that yoga, in the way that we know it today, is absolutely cultural appropriation.